afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the presentation this afternoon on digital banking and what it takes to win in this ever-crowded space. My name is Patrycja Oselkowska. I'm a partner with Deloitte Digital, based here in Dubai. Previously, I spent a significant amount of time in Greater China. I also serve clients in Southeast Asia, so Singapore, it's also the market I'm familiar with, as well as I was based in Europe. And throughout my career, I work with financial services clients, both with incumbent banks that were undergoing digital transformation, as well as with pure digital banks, helping them all the way from license application, proposition design, build, and launch. So let's talk about digital banking. I have 3 points I'd like to take you through. First of all, let's start with the basics. What are the digital banks? I think we all may have slightly different view of what those banks are or are not, so let me start with my definition. Then I want to talk to you about 4 imperatives of what it takes to win in the digital banking space. And last but not least, let's talk about the future. What are the driving forces shaping the future of digital banking? Quick intro. The numbers you see on this slide are staggering. More than half of the world population will be using digital banking services by 2026. Currently, about 1 billion people are already using some form of digital banking. Nearly $100 billion is already deposited with digital banks. There are about 400 banks globally, but vast majority of those banks are yet to be profitable. And I will talk about that last point later on. Okay, but you may ask, we've heard the word neobanks, we've heard the word challenger bank, we've heard the word virtual bank. What is this thing? All right, so let's start with the simple fact. Digital bank doesn't have branches, it's available on your mobile phones. You can do all of your banking on your fingertips. Those are branchless and digitally native institutions. They leverage seamless customer experience and intuitive marketing. And last but not least, they typically, you would expect, to have an advantage of lower operating cost, simply because they don't have the branches, they have an app, they have a much smaller team than traditional banks, and they have modern technology stack. And you see on the map, this is truly a global phenomenon. It started about a decade ago in the UK and the US, and you see lots of logos there. It then moved into Asia, and we know the banks that launched in places like Hong Kong and Singapore. And now the wave is here in the Middle East, right? We have the first digital banks launching in Dubai. We have actually WIO in this fintech event. We have Saudi regulator issuing first digital banking licenses. We have Qatari and Egyptian regulators making first inroads in this space as well. So we're going to see a much more crowded space in Middle East. So let's talk about those 4 imperatives, what it takes to be successful in digital banking space. I'd like to keep things simple. First, start with your customer. Then, be personalized and differentiated. Then, be agile, go to market fast. And last but not least, have a view of how you're going to achieve profitability. So let me talk about those 4 elements one by one. First, starting with a hyper-focused customer strategy. I think digital banks represent a mindset shift. It's not about product pushing, it's not about selling, it's about serving the customers. And in order to do that, you really need to understand who are your customers, you need to have a vast amount of data, and you need the data to make sense. It's not just the typical banking data that we talk here about. It's a data from an entire ecosystem of partners in order to enrich your understanding of your target customer group. And once you have that data, once you understood your customer needs and wants, you really can focus on the moments that matter. Maybe you've heard the expression moments of truth. What are those key elements in the digital interactions with your customers that you really need to get right? You cannot take any shortcuts there. And last but not least, it's about trust. How do you create trust association with your brand? Traditional banks, the incumbents, they have the advantage in this space. They've been around for much longer. They can prove that they can keep our money safe. But as a digital bank, does it mean you have no chance to create brand? I mean, trust is extremely important because research indicates that customers that trust their brand, they are loyal. They will keep coming back and make repeat purchases. They are exclusive with you. And last but not least, they are more likely to forgive you any glitches along the interactions. So Deloitte made this research into a concept that we call Trust ID. And there are 4 elements to that Trust ID that digital banks need to get right in order to create that trust association. Let me explain a little bit more. The first, it's about humanity. Are you a purpose-driven organization? Do you have the right diversity and inclusiveness? Are you treating your customers fairly? Are you treating your employees fairly? That's the type of association you want to create. The second is about transparency. Are you the type of organization that's going to send me 5 pages of terms and conditions, font 8, in order for me to find the so-called hidden charges? Or are you the type of organization that's going to use very inclusive language and make it easy for me and transparent to find information? The next one is capability. Are you really delivering on that digital experience so that when I go through this journey end to end, at the end of that journey, I have a real-time decision? Or are you creating high expectation and at the end of that digital journey, you're sending me to another channel to deliver further documents? And last but not least, reliability. Are you able to deliver on this experience over and over again? So that's about the customer and the first strategic imperative. The second imperative is focused about personalization and differentiation. I mean, let's unpick how digital banks go to market with the so-called MVP, minimum viable product. Typically, it's a very simple proposition. From the pure product perspective, it tends to be current account, saving account, debit card, maybe some elements of personal financial management, maybe FX, but genuinely something that is quite straightforward. So therefore, how do you differentiate, right? So let's start with the very first thing. Solve the customer pain point. We've all been there, and we all know how painful it can be to deal with a particular issue with a bank. Okay, so really solve this pain point for the customer, make it frictionless. And I want to give you here my favorite example, which is one of the digital banks I had a pleasure of working with, that really thought about eKYC, know your customer. In a traditional onboarding journey, most of the banks ask for a proof of address. So this means you need to find some sort of electricity bill. You need to then upload this bill as part of your digital journey. Then the bank needs to verify that this bill is correct, and then they tell you, yes, we accept you. Okay, that's one way of doing onboarding. This particular bank had a very simple MVP. The MVP was a current account, saving account with a debit card, no credit. Therefore, they said, well, we're not giving money to the customers. The customers are actually giving money to us, right? They're keeping money in our current account. We don't need that traditional proof of address. Instead, when we are delivering the physical card to the customer, and the customer is activating this card, we will use it as a proof of address. So therefore, you don't need to ask this question during the onboarding journey. The result was 3 minutes to open a bank account, a fully functioning bank account. 3 minutes. The second area of differentiation is focused on the right incentives. I think we've seen digital banks, when they launch, they typically focus on attracting customers through high interest rates, right? They want you to put money with them because they're going to give you more interest rate than a traditional bank. That means you have to have very deep pockets to sustain that. And therefore, you need to go beyond. What else is out there? What type of incentives work for your clients in order to increase engagement? And again, let me give you 2 examples. The first example is a bank that introduced an element of gamification. Every time you would use their card to pay for something, they had this spin the wheel concept. You had to go to the app and spin the digital wheel in order to win cashback. And the percentage of the cashback would depend on you spinning that wheel. And that gave them a really great customer engagement. I mean, the social media buzz was really great because that type of incentive resonated really well with that customer segment. And second of all, it deepened the engagement within the app because they had more customer touch points every time that customer spins the wheel. And another example how to incentivize customers, even more simple. Most banks do pay interest rates, and you only find out about that interest you earn on your account at the end of the month. This particular bank thought of it as a daily interest rate, so that every day they would show on your account how much money did you earn today. I mean, it's brilliant in its simplicity because, again, that drove traffic to the app. And last but not least, everything you do, your proposition needs to be human-centric. Start with the customer at the center. What is that idea that you have that's going to make you different? Is it lifestyle banking? Is it banking focused on a specific segment, female, blue collars, etc.? And then evolve this idea quickly through prototyping, test, learn, and I cannot overemphasize this element of testing, learning, refining, and then generate insights in order to feed into the next cycle of the ideation process. So that's the key imperative number 2, right? So personalized and differentiated proposition. Let's talk about number 3. This one looks at the digital banks inwards. It looks at the operating model of a digital bank. And this is not just a pure technology play. Yes, of course, digital bank is about technology. It's about having modern, scalable technology platform. But your customers are not going to get excited whether you've used Flutter to deliver your front end or is it React Native, right? They're not going to care about it. So think about the culture of the organization you want to create and the talent you want to attract. You want to have a culture that breaks the boundaries, that removes red tape, that is focused on innovation, but also the culture that is perhaps purpose-driven, that is about sustainability, that is about creating a societal impact. As this is the type of culture, the likely employees you want to attract are going to care about. And by the way, the type of talent that works for digital banks, the type of skill set, is in high demand. It's not just the digital banks, it's also the incumbent banks that are looking for this type of talent. I mentioned red tape, but don't forget about the regulatory framework. The digital banks, they still operate in a highly regulated environment. There is still a regulator, and you need to adhere to the regulatory requirements. However, be smart about it. Remember the example about the eKYC. I mean, you can push that envelope further depending on what type of digital bank are you. And last but not least, think beyond banking. Create this element of platforms and partnerships that enable you to bring adjacent products and services that can be connected on that platform in order to create something that is very differentiated and also very sticky with your customers. So that's the strategic imperative number 3. Let's talk about the final one, the path to profitability. So I mentioned already that when banks launch, typically it's stage 1. It's about attracting customers, it's about building the brand, but also it's about relatively simple MVP. Current account, saving account, debit card, largely not credit, and that means that on one hand side, you're spending a lot of money to attract those customers. On the other, you're not really making any money. So path to profitability is going to take some time. Therefore, if you move to stage 2, it's about diversifying your revenue streams. And that diversification happens across many different paths. One of those paths could be about adding additional products into your mix, such as credit, such as investment, but also value-added services. It's also about more sophisticated, more challenging customer segments like SME customers. And last but not least, the final stage, it's really about growing your business portfolio and lending volumes. It's about moving up the value chain into mid-market and corporate customers, and also looking at more sophisticated products and services, large loans, insurance, but also perhaps thinking about how can you package the tech you've created as platform, as a service, white label it, and offer it to other digital banks, right? That's another way to monetize on your investment. So to summarize, the 4 imperatives are about customer, differentiated proposition. It's about looking inwards at your operating model, at your culture, at how you embed risk framework. And last but not least, it's about thinking on that path to profitability. So that brings me to the final topic, the driving forces shaping the future of digital banking. And of course, I don't have a crystal ball. The future may bring different things, but I think banking industry has already been on a journey, and a lot of changes have happened in the last couple of years. The most immediate changes you need to be prepared for, but you need to think about how you're going to act on those changes. Then the next phase, it's about being prepared for the next wave of different forces shaping the digital banking. And finally, the last, it's about what are the trends to watch. And we broadly identified 7 areas here. And of course, 2 of my previous presenters were talking about Gen AI. It is one of those elements that we do need to focus on. My view on Gen AI is that in the banking environment, Gen AI is more used on the cost takeout space. It's probably more used to support human rather than directly facing human. It's still a very much regulated environment. Therefore, putting a Gen AI avatar right in front of the human probably still has some way to go. So with this, I'd like to conclude. I think the digital banks have the right attitude, the right way of embracing change and innovation to be very much prepared to embrace whatever the future may hold. They definitely have the modern technology stack to be ready for technology changes. But whatever the future may hold, that we shall see. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be available for questions off the stage.